Now take that, you fucking Nazi. Fucking kraut. I bet your mom's a slut. Oh, I shot that guy like a fucking million times. Fuck you, you little cunt. Hey guys, what's going on? It's big time power rankings video time, guys. Sorry about that. You know, I was really upset about the loss this week that I took. A heartbreaking 1-point loss, so I just thought playing a little Call of Duty World War II was the perfect thing to really calm me down. You know, it's those violent video games, they always get me calm and relaxed. You know, I'm not one of those guys that really gets angry or anything, or, you know, is talking a lot of smack or anything like that. So that's not really me. Unfortunately, guys, I do have some bad news, okay? Now, I know in the last video you saw that my production crew was on strike, and the reason for that, unfortunately, is that I did not pay them because I ran out of money, which means the studio is not letting me record there anymore, and now I am forced to make these Power Rankings videos from the bathroom of my room, sitting on my toilet. Now, the good news is I have invested all my money in a low-yield government bond, and according to current projections, in 29 years, I am going to make all that money back, and I am going to be able to afford to get back in the studio. So guys, 29 years from now, when this league is still going strong, I will finally be able to make the great Power Rankings videos again. But for now, it is just me in my bathroom doing a Power Rankings video, guys. So without further ado, let's get started. Here we go, guys, talking about number 12 in the league, the bottom of the barrel. And it's no surprise that we find Sean Bates in the 08 Detroit Lions down here. Obviously, Brendan last week beat this team in one of a long line of just terrible performances. But this week, the story was not the same. We're talking about one of the worst weeks we've ever seen in terms of scoring. A lot of teams just doing really, really badly. And then of all teams, Sean Bates and Jared Meyer coming up with two big-time performances. And it's just terrible luck on your part, Sean. You had 92 points. That's respectable in any week. And to have it done this week was very, very unusual. Alshon Jeffrey finally making himself useful for once. His first double-digit performance for your guys. You know, 20 points this week after 14. So clearly he's getting on a hot streak, perhaps with Wentz playing better than ever. That will help you. But unfortunately, what will not help you is just weak running backs. With TJ Yeldon, basically really a third stringer you had to play in there. He fumbled. Doug Martin with 8 carries for 7 yards. Oh, that really hurts. That's got to hurt. And your team really suffered as a result. You could have gotten in the win column this week. You would have beat almost anybody. But you didn't get in the win column this week. And much like the 08 Detroit Lions, you are looking like you are in serious danger of losing every game this year. I will give you credit. You have stuck with it. You set your lineup every week. You've continued to make transactions now, but what you just need to do is set your lineup better and make better transactions so you can win. That's all you have to do is just do everything you're doing, except just do it better. No problem, right? I know you got it in you, Sean. I'm sure you'll get a win eventually. Might take a few years, but I know you'll get there, Sean. I promise. Guys, what we are doing now is talking about the number 11 team in this league. And for so many weeks, it has been the same old story. True friends of the Crown and Brendan Costello. The team names continue to change, but the quality of the performances remains quite similar. 72 points this week. Man alive, this was just a real shit show in so many ways. Drew Brees, this week, 18 points is not amazing by any stretch, and it is the best Brees has done in a while. His status as an elite fantasy quarterback has really been called into question. He is only ranked number 8. This is a guy that's been perennial top 5, and you really need a lot of these big points from Brees, and you're just not getting those kinds of performances from this guy. And as Brees continues to trend down, the Saints trend up. They're learning how to run the ball, and that doesn't help you at all. Speaking of running the ball, let's take a look at your guys this week. Frank Gore, 7 points. That's decent, but not RB1 material by any stretch. And then Alex Collins, completely supplanted this week by Javorius Allen, much, much better. But the real summation of your team has to be the horror of the Blair Walsh Project. This guy's kicks were scarier than the actual movie when we're talking about -3 fantasy points and also a Seattle Seahawks loss. Over 3 on field goals. None of them were even 50 plus. I mean, the guy just completely shit himself. You also, not that it really matters, started Zach Ertz, who didn't play. Overall, it looks like you've almost given up, honestly. Not very impressive at all. I just gave Sean props. Well, now I'm going to have to give you the opposite of props. What the hell are you doing, man? You got to set your lineup. I mean, you won last week. You would think that you would be even more motivated than normal to set your lineup. Obviously not the case. Just really, really got to step it up. All right, gentlemen, it is that time of the video again. I thought that I was going to be able to stay out of this spot, but I slipped backwards. The number 10 team, Warheads on Foreheads, guys. I'm going back to the old name. This new name did not work for me this week, and I really can't blame the name. A lot of people probably looked at this lineup and said, this might be the worst lineup ever set. My team has terrible depth, as you all know. The starters, most of the time, don't even perform that well. And then when you just got crazy bye-week problems and injuries, you have to set a lineup like this. And I could have done better with it. I took a gamble on some of the Niners players instead of, playing it safer. George Kittle, obviously, getting injured in the middle of the game, not ideal. A lot of bad decisions I made, I have to admit. So many things could have gone differently for me to get a win this week. I lost by 1 to Cam's team, which he didn't have nearly as many problems as I did. His team still almost did as shitty. I think that shows a lot. I have to win out at this point and get help. My playoff chances so damaged by this loss. Really just critical that this happened this week. I don't know what to say, guys. It's really bad, but the good news is I'm getting my guys back this week, and hopefully the win streak starts against Pablo. It's going to be real tough, but I've got to believe that my team can pull together and somehow get a clutch win this week. So hopefully that's what happens, and we'll see if I can climb back into that 9 spot. I really enjoyed being there in that 9 spot. It's time to get back there, and we'll see if I can do it this week. All right, guys, let's talk about the number 9 team in this league. I kind of had a little bit of pause doing this, but at the end of the day, I had to put Jared Meyer and fuck Donald Trump at this spot. Maybe he deserved to be higher after getting the top score this week, but I remember when I got the top score one week, I didn't really move myself much up in the rankings because of my record, and this has to be one of those cases. This is unexpected. This is very, very unusual, and frankly, it makes me uncomfortable, much like Michael Sam making out with his boyfriend on live television, which also made me very uncomfortable. I think this is highly, highly irregular, and when you look at the running backs, which has been the weakness for the last few weeks, Devontae Freeman and Bilal Powell, those are a couple of losers. Freaking Beavis and Butthead at running back. Freeman clearly being surpassed at this point by Tevin Coleman. Now, 4 out of the last 5 weeks he's been outscored. Bilal Powell played second fiddle to my Matt Forte this week. Only 7 from him, but the receiving core. Doug Baldwin getting in the end zone again with Wilson doing so much better. He is bound to do better, but Demaryius Thomas getting in the end zone for the first time was really what set your team apart from most previous weeks when Thomas is relegated to merely single digits. Other big news, Robert Woods. Highly suspect. I think the league needs to launch an investigation. There's no way you're smart enough to make a move like Robert Woods. Clearly you had some inside knowledge. Some insider trading may have been happening here. I don't know, Jared, but I don't like it. I think the commissioner's office would be definitely inclined to do an investigation as to how you knew that this was going to happen. In all seriousness, congratulations. 111 points. That's very, very good. I don't think it's going to last, and it's probably too late for your team to be in the playoff hunt. Like me, you're going to have to win out. I mean, that's really tough to do with 4 games left. Best of luck, but I just don't think it's going to happen, Jared. I'm sorry about that, and there's really nothing I can do. Number 8, okay, this is the now starting the portion of the teams that all still have somewhat realistic playoff chances with their records. They're, within 1 game basically at this point of being in the playoffs, and our lowest ranked team in this category, this was an easy one. Highway to the Danger Jones, Cam Lautenschlager. A 1-point win against my roster this week. That's not impressive. Basically, what you did this week was the equivalent of fucking a fat chick, okay? And what you did was, you did this thing, and you might not even really feel that good about it. You're questioning everything. You better not be bragging about it to anyone. The parallels are very similar here, Cam. I'm sure you know what I mean. Moving on to why this was. Kareem Hunt. Going from freaking beast, consistent every week. Now these last 2 weeks, very, very, quite frankly, weak performances from him. 6 and 5. What's going on with this guy? And then Aaron Jones of Green Bay, just completely shitting himself. 11 total yards and 1 point. Man alive. Aaron Jones completely supplanted. Corey Davis, crusty as hell. I mean, this is not a great lineup. And you had some definite points on your bench with Jay Ajayi. That's the one bright side for you, is that Ajayi will be coming back, and perhaps even better than normal, had a touchdown for the first time this season in the Philadelphia uniform. And with Aaron Jones losing a lot of carries to Ty Montgomery, who knows what the dynamic is there. You might want to consider Ajayi, although neither one of them is a super reliable option at this point. A 61-60 win has you at 5-4 and well within the playoff race, but you might be one of the favorites to sort of fall back out of this race, while some of these other teams that may even have 4-5 records, but they clearly seem to have better rosters than you, and we're going to get to some of those teams here in just a second. Cam, you're going to have to manage your way out of this jam. I know you're capable of it, but at the same time, there's a lot of other guys that have good management skills that you're competing with. So we will have to see what happens. But if it was me making the decision today, I'd say that you are probably just barely going to miss the playoffs. Number 7 in these power rankings, guys, and the number 7, spoiler alert, is also the number of wins this team has, which may shock you. But I am now going to make my case for why Jake Smith in Trump 2020 is actually the 7th ranked team in this league despite a 7-2 record. I mean, 58 points. You wouldn't even have beat my shitty team this week. An absolute disgrace. The second fewest in the league, I believe, this week. Let me just verify that real quick. Want to make sure the facts are good. Confirmed. You absolutely got roasted this week. You lost Deshaun Watson, and your team losing Deshaun Watson is sort of like what would have happened if the Beatles lost John Lennon and Paul McCartney and George Harrison and Ringo Starr. In other words, there's nothing left, okay? Look at this roster. Will Fuller, the 5th, throw him out. Guy is completely useless now, just like almost every other player on this Houston Texans team. Lamar Miller, he might suffer. I think it's pretty likely that he's going to suffer. 8 points is decent, but LeGarrette Blount, now that they have Jay Ajayi, it's just going to be fewer carries for him now in a crowded Philadelphia backfield. And then Jonathan Stewart. Do I need to say anything about this guy? 2 lost fumbles. God damn, dude. 58 points. Your most consistent player is Jake Elliott at the kicker spot. And yeah, you're getting some guys back up bye week, but Keenan Allen, he is having his worst season ever by far. The 2 games this season where he's had 10 plus fantasy points and 1 touchdown total, which was in week 1. So Allen is just a complete bust as far as I'm concerned. Kelvin Benjamin, big question mark. Nobody knows what he's going to do, okay? This guy, he could be putting up big numbers, or he could just completely fall flat in Buffalo, which is notorious for its snowy winters, rendering perhaps half of his games from here on out useless because of the terrible weather conditions. It's going to be a hard sell to have your team anything higher than 7th with the roster. You got beat by OGAP this week, whose team didn't even play that well, played pretty well, but there's just a lot of signs that say your team is not going to be able to recover from this Deshaun Watson injury. He was carrying your team. Everyone in the league's been questioning your roster, and I think those questions are definitely warranted in this spot, and that's why I'm only going to have you ranked 7 here. Outside of the top half of this league, I think you're trending way down. You'll be able to say you made the playoffs this year, but anything more than that, highly unlikely. All right, guys, moving to the top half of the power rankings this week, and coming in right here at number 6 is the Shit Mixers, talking about Chris Hasenheier, guys, and really just a Jekyll and Hyde type season for this guy. I mean, last 2 weeks you've been sucking. It's like your team went from the Trent Green Rams to the Kurt Warner Rams, just like that this week. Your team scored the 3rd most points of this week, and you got a win, which would normally merit a higher ranking, but your team at this point is way too inconsistent to move up past 6. You did move up a little bit in these rankings, but you just cannot afford to have any higher ranking than number 6 right now. Let's take a look at this team. Your quarterback situation obviously is just brutal at this point, but you picked up Josh McCown, which, I mean, you got to hand it to you. That was a pretty good pickup. 16 points was something I think a lot of people weren't going to expect from Josh McCown, but of course the people also thought the Jets were going to go 0-16 this year. Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey. Now that is a solid running back pair, and not really in the traditional way. You take a look, you know, Kamara getting 10 carries. I believe for both of these guys, I mean, Kamara had a season high in carries, and McCaffrey also had a season high in carries. So these are guys that are normally aerial backs, getting pass catches. They've also got it done on the ground. Both of them had a rushing touchdown this week, and Kamara added a receiving touchdown. Tyreek Hill, really a bounce-back week after he threw an interception somehow at the wide receiver position last week, getting good points. Hill has been inconsistent. He's a guy that doesn't get a lot of touches, but he makes big plays happen. He made one of the best plays in the NFL this year by far at the end of that first half in Dallas. A couple of weak spots, though, and the reason that's really holding your team back is your play of Deshaun Jackson is just really sad, and when these running backs don't go off, your team is looking very thin otherwise. Maybe you picked up a starter in Kenyon Drake, but Chris, your team has a lot of holes. In some weeks you put up big numbers, but you just don't have the marquee players right now to really put up the consistent numbers that it's going to take. And that's why you're barely hanging on to this playoff contention, and there's potential for other teams to pass you if your team doesn't find a way to start scoring consistent numbers of points. All right, guys, let's talk top 5 time, and right on the edge of this top 5, which is really what I like to say is the contending teams for the championship, right on the edge of that, and it's going to be a struggle from here on. It's mine, the OGAP, and Austin Porter. This team has overcome the adversity that has happened with the Aaron Rodgers injury about as well as can be expected. 78 points is not very good. Your team still has firepower. Todd Gurley, obviously just a stud. 2 more touchdowns this week and over 100 total yards. Dak Prescott, it's like Aaron Rodgers didn't even leave when it comes to the quarterback play of your team, but Jordy Nelson has struggled so much. it's just really too bad that this happened, because Jordy Nelson was really one of the guys doing big things. I mean, you just look at these early season numbers, just touchdown after touchdown, and you just can't replace that. I mean, it's like when Freddie Mercury died with Queen. You know, the rest of those guys are talented, but you just don't have the same kind of punch without your top guy there. And the receiving core has been a bit of a suspect area for you. Jordy Nelson and Michael Crabtree have both suffered, I think, from quarterback play as of late, poor quarterback play, and you're not getting a lot of help from other places. Chris Thompson's kind of up and down. It's hard for me to see this team truly competing for a championship when you've had this many injury problems, and the fact that Jordy Nelson isn't scoring. You need to get him back, and you picked up Niners D. That's another thing. What were you thinking, man? You gone insane? Have you lost your mind? Why would you ever do something like that? Don't pick up the Niners D. Never ever do that. Please, I'm begging you. Don't pick up the Niners D. It's a bad mistake. Drop them. Cut these guys. They have no talent, and I just really don't know what you were thinking when you had Ravens D on the waiver wire, the #1 defense. Come on, man. All right, guys, let's talk. Number 4 now. It's the final 4, and coming right into the edge of this list, we have domestic Zeke violence. Pablo at number 4, even though he had the lowest points this week. I mean, this is dangerous waters, and I have been saying that this team is bound to collapse here, just being held together by a string now. Ezekiel Elliott, a threat to get suspended every single week, and it's just not a good situation right now. When you look at the depth, it's just been destroyed. I mean, Melvin Gordon was on a bye week, but I don't even think that would have really saved you. Jarvis Landry, Sterling Shepard, and Jermaine Kearse, there's just no big star there. Landry is pretty good, but he is just not going to be able to put up the huge numbers of points for the most part. I mean, he's your highest ranked wide receiver, and he's all the way down the list of 21. You don't have anybody in the top 20 at the receiver position. Winston being out, Matt Ryan's been anything but reliable. I mean, I ranked you, I kept you at number 4 this week, even though you had the lowest points, because every time I've said your team is about to collapse, you seem to just continue to win and put up big numbers. All these injuries, all of these problems you've had this year. But now this really might be the end. I mean, it's just really hard to see you able to hold this together. And if Zeke gets suspended, your team is just toast. I mean, you're just going to not have anybody there at all. Yeah, I'm sorry, Pablo, but it's hard to have faith in this team. I put you at number 4, but that could change any minute now. Even though you're a 7-2 team, you could definitely plummet down these rankings a la Jake at this point. Hate to sound the panic alarm here, but it's not looking good. I wish you the best, but I just don't have high hopes for your chances to really contend for a championship this year. All right, guys, number 3, and this is the guy I had number 1 in my preseason rankings, and a guy that's just been all over this ranking. He's was really low early on in the season when his team was struggling, but has now risen. It is Brandon Niblock, and rowing on the Wilson. Another win this week for Nibs, now one of the 7-2 teams, the 4 7-2 teams in this league, which is pretty crazy. But he has really been trending upward, and I think, you know, honestly, one of the biggest reasons why Nibs has had success this season is his ability to avoid that injury bug. We've had so many top stars go down injured with really devastating injuries, not just minor stuff, but big-time injuries. And Nibs has avoided seemingly all of these problems. And he's had some guys underperform. Julio Jones has underperformed for much of this year. Amari Cooper, who he acquired in a trade, he's still really waiting to see big-time dividends. The one week he had a huge game, he was on his bench, and then he plays him, and then all of a sudden he just goes back to his underperforming self. But Jordan Howard is such a stud, and Travis Kelce is a stud, and Russell Wilson's been consistent, okay? And Nibs, you know he's just going to be able to manage his way to victories every week, because that's what this guy does. Really one of the best most skilled fantasy players I've ever seen, and I've known that too well over the years with him beating me in some championship games. 86 this week was, normally you wouldn't look at that and say, wow, that's really great, but with all the weird things that happened this week and the low scoring, that's actually a pretty good score line to come out with at the end of the day. He's got to be pleased with that, and Wilson has absolutely been lights out these last few weeks. Nibs now at number 3, really realizing what I thought would be his big-time potential at the beginning of this year. He's made some trades. Julio Jones, 118 yards, so even though he didn't get in the end zone, that's his first 100-yard game since week 2, and a guy that normally just churns out these big 100-yard weeks. Touchdowns have been the issue, but Jones seems to play better recently, so hopefully that trend continues for you at least. For the rest of this league, I think they just want Julio Jones to continue to be what has been a very mediocre season for him overall. So that's the rank, number 3. I think you're right where you need to be on this one. Have to agree with Cam on the team name. Just another example, my power ranking videos changing the game. Your changed team name really reflects what your team has been doing. Your team has leaned heavily on Russell Wilson these last few weeks, and that's not a bad thing. He's a great, reliable guy to lean on, and someone that I think everyone wishes was on their team. All right, moving on to the number 2 team in this league. This guy was number 1 last week, and frankly, I don't think anyone knows what happened. That's right, it is now the O.J. Simpson Dream Team. Goblin McGregor just churning out the controversial names. I have to say it's a little bit better than the last name. The Sandy Hook team name might have been way too far, and I'm willing to say definitely was way too far. A bridge too far. Now let's take a look at this team now named the O.J. Simpson Dream Team, and boy howdy, you take a look at this lineup. This team was just star-studded. I mean, it's sort of like that movie with a great cast that just is terrible. I mean, it's basically the Ocean's 12 of teams. You're thinking, how could a team with Matt Damon, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and all these other guys be so terrible? And then it is. And then you look at your roster, it's the same thing. You've got Dez Bryant, Mike Evans, LaShawn McCoy, Alex Smith, all these star-studded guys. Leonard Fournette gets benched. I mean, just a lot of weird stuff happening this week, and that's why I didn't move you down too far, because Leonard Fournette getting benched for missing a team photo, Mike Evans getting suspended and kicked out of that game. Weird things happening all over the place. Eddie Lacy also got injured. But at the same time, you got to have expected that this team would have churned out more points. I'm sure you thought LaShawn McCoy was back after 2 great weeks in a row. Well, I have news for you. And one word to describe that thinking. Wrong. So wrong. This is absolutely ridiculous. McCoy, a terrible performance this week. And with Evans suspended, yes, you are getting Antonio Brown back, so that should help, as well as Rob Gronkowski. So hopefully that won't affect you too much. You're still right there, and still, I think, in my personal opinion, the favorite to win this league. But I had to move you down for just a really disappointing loss this week, especially facing a team I'm sure you thought you were going to beat in Chris Hasenheier. So bad news for you, but I think I see this getting better. I think I see you going from Ocean's 12 back to Pulp Fiction, and then maybe eventually even the king of all casts, The Godfather. All right. Now I know what you're all waiting for, and here it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for what you've all been waiting for. The number 1 team in the power rankings back on top, separated from the top for a couple of weeks, but right there now, it is Team Brady Bunch and Nate Solly. Nate, your team is back on top again, and T.Y. Hilton and his fire performance, a big reason why. All right, this guy, T.Y. Hilton, let me tell you something. He's had about as many points as he's had letter in his first name these last couple of weeks. 2, 1, a lot of just garbage performances. But this guy just goes up every once in a while, and this is one of those weeks. 29 points, flex position. You're going to win every time. You can't lose with that kind of production. Tom Brady's on this bye week, and you still put up the 2nd most points in the league. You're not going to have to play Eli Manning and his cruddy ass very often, will you? And AJ Green is definitely probably not planning on getting ejected again. This guy, I mean, what's with all the ejections this week? Green kicked out of that game after only 1 catch for 6 yards. That's not going to happen every week. Your team has had success despite some of your top performers just not doing very well recently. Green being the main guy I'm talking about when I say that. But your team has just got depth, and you find ways to score in creative ways. Carlos Hyde back into double digits. I projected that he would do better. He has, and I think it's going to be even better against the Giants next week, so hopefully. So looking good there. I like the trajectory of this team. You've been able to stay as one of the top teams all year. Also have been one of those teams that's avoided the injury bug, so congratulations. You're back at number 1. I hope it feels great. And hopefully there'll be a little more stability at number 1. Honestly, it's a little bit more difficult to make these videos when there's a new number 1 team every single week. So if I could please get some consistency out of you guys, that would be much, much appreciated. I would prefer to not have to think very hard about these power ranking videos. You guys know how much I hate thinking about things. Come on, guys, got to step it up. Take the pressure off. All right, guys, that's going to do it for these power rankings. Hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe not as big razzle-dazzle, but, you know, when you run out of money and have to record in the bathroom, you know, you're basically just taking what you can get at this point, guys. So, I mean, if you guys want to complain, that's fine. Make your own fucking videos. I don't know. Peace out, guys.